Hey friends, thanks for watching. I call this one a Tale of Two Farriers. I want to introduce you to a young man who is a creator, a husband, a father, a farrier. His name's Caleb Erickson. He has a podcast named The Dying Breed, where he kind of explores the life of the folks that are doing jobs that are kind of thought to be forgotten. Anyway, interesting young man. You're going to have a lot of fun getting to know him. We're cleared for takeoff. So I think you and I are both going to learn a lot from each other for
Yeah,
this podcast.
I mean, your book is the reason that I think a lot of people pass the CF and the CJF. I really do. I think, and Cody's drawings are brilliant. Like the way it's
Well, they're
broken
made for
down.
horseshoers. They're not made for
Right.
vets, right?
Isn't it
Okay.
crazy to think about the fact that we're sitting here doing this? You know,
At
like
a horseshoeing convention.
yeah, at a horseshoeing
Yeah.
convention.
Where's the anvil?
Yeah, where's the anvil? You
Right.
know, it's kind of
Well,
crazy.
hey, Caleb,
Yes,
Chris
sir.
Gregory.
Nice to meet you, man.
Nice to meet you.
Welcome to the Dying Breed. I'm Caleb Erickson, and I'm here with Final Approach.
Final Approach with Chris Gregory. So, welcome to Final Approach with Chris Gregory and Dying Breed combo. So
Yeah.
we're experimenting a little bit.
Yeah, this is first time that I've tried to do two podcasts in the same deal, which I'm actually it's kind of cool because, again, like we were talking earlier, where's the anvil? Like,
Yeah. We're horseshoers, and my podcast is based on high achievers and kind of figured out how they became high achievers. What's yours?
mine is kind of a similar bent on that. I was shoeing horses, and I'd go around and I'd meet these really cool people, you know, that really cool life stories, and most of them either didn't have social media or didn't really interact with social media much, and I feel like the stories are being lost.
Okay.
And so I wanted to bring those stories so people could hear them.
All right. And a
And
real good name, Dying Breed.
yeah, and there's so many things like horseshoeing. Um, I can't remember who said it at the convention, but he said that the 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 forging part of the show is getting smaller and smaller, and then the marketplace is getting bigger and bigger. And so I think was it Craig Turnka or Bodie Turnka at the Winter Clinic last year talked about upping our skill.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, there's nothing that weighs your truck down like a lack of skills. That's one of my favorite sayings, you know. So the better you get at shoeing horses, the less you need. You can go out with a forge and anvil, some tools, and a piece of bar stock and shoe any horse. Or you can go out with 800 pounds of keg shoes, so you have every variable, every potential modification. And
Right.
so your skills are, you're making up for your skills with inventory.
Well, and I think you make more money. Not that money is the driving force, but you become more efficient.
So here's a really important thing to think about. And how old are you, Caleb?
I'm going to be 30 this next year.
Okay, so you're a young man. If you learn how to make a shoe, make a bar shoe, pull a clip, and all of that stuff whenever you're 30, and you shoe horses till you're 60, you have 30 years to enjoy those skills, right? And you know what they say about planting a tree?
Right.
The best day to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The
Right.
second best day is today. So whatever part you're at in your career, if you learn how to pull a clip now, you have the rest of your career to enjoy that skill instead of paying somebody else, the manufacturer, to pull your clip.
And it's crazy to me because, you know, I've said this multiple times this week, and I keep harping on it. You know, the greatest sinner is the greatest convert.
Right.
You know, so I was, you know, whacking and tacking.
Okay, so let me ask that. How old were you when you started shooting horses?
I got out of high school. I was 18. When I got out of high school, I was 16.
Okay.
I passed high school and went into college.
Were you a homeschool kid?
Yeah, I sure
Okay.
was.
All right.
You know, my baseline is awkward.
No, actually, it's the opposite nowadays.
Yeah, it is kind of crazy, isn't it?
The public school kids are the ones that are kind of.
I do think, you know, at least for me, I mean, I was, you know, getting out and being a part of, you know, the college experience was phenomenal for me. It taught me to communicate better.
Okay.
It forced me to communicate.
And where did you grow up?
I spent a little time all over, mostly Idaho.
Okay. Was your dad in the military or something?
No, my dad was he was an ag. He was a fertilizer salesman,
Oh.
and sold like his company sold to like Prime Land and McGregor's and all those individuals.
I think my chair is. Oh, there it is. All right.
So
Okay.
yeah, so like
So he was traveling to do that.
yeah, my dad was on the road a lot. We moved up into a place called Craigmont. It's in the middle of nowhere, and I got my first horse. And since I was 5, I wanted horses.
Okay.
Like I either wanted to be military or horses, and I ended up in horses.
No military then.
No, my family's 4 generations military, so I was raised around it, so I have a real soft spot for it. But I ended up in horses, and
Now, do you have brothers and sisters?
I got 3.
And where do you fit in?
I'm the oldest.
Oh, all right.
So yeah, I was the.
So you got to be the leader of the gang.
I was supposed to be the example.
Well, you know, sometimes a bad example is still an example, right?
Yeah, what not to do. You don't get caught doing it anyway. So so I don't know a lot about your start. I mean, you're pretty much a legend. I don't think there's any farrier in the country that doesn't know Heartland or.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but I grew up on a ranch in New Mexico, and you know, my dad wasn't a farrier. He's actually a lawyer that owned a ranch. But we'd put shoes on. He'd hire shoeing done, so he didn't have to buy shoes. And then whenever they needed done again, we could do some of that. And it wasn't right. And then I went to college on a steer wrestling scholarship. So actually, I left home at 15, went to military high school
Oh, really?
to ride bulls, New Mexico Military Institute. And I was just gonna, you know, I dreamed of being a rodeo cowboy. And so I didn't even know what I was getting into. My dad had been a field artillery officer during Vietnam. And so he said, all right, boy, you can go, but you can't quit. So I found myself at New Mexico Military Institute, and I couldn't quit, but God, I wanted to. That place was a great place to be from, but it was a crucible. You know,
Really?
as a 15-year-old, being in that environment was tough. And this was 1983, so it was a different time in the world, you know.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I got through high school, got through military school, and I was a steer wrestler. I was no longer riding bulls. I wasn't good at it. I had a desire, but I didn't have talent. And
Do you think it's height? I mean, I've known.
no, I think it was lack of coaching, lack of I didn't really know what I was doing.
Right.
I'd put my feet on both sides and grab the rope and then
And just go for
hope. Yeah, but I started steer wrestling, and that really became my goal. Went to college on a rodeo scholarship, and I started shooting my horse. And pretty soon I shooting my buddies' horses. Pretty soon I had this whole job I never intended.
Right.
So I went through 5 years of college, got a bunch of degrees, and did all that. But I shot horses the whole time. Got married while I was in college, 19.
Right.
Then in 1991, we graduated college with $12,000 cash and no debt. And
Oh,
it was
wow.
all from shoeing horses. I was getting 23 to shoe a horse, 18 for resets, and 12 for trims.
Wow.
And I made 12 grand surplus, you know.
Which I saw something the other day. Sorry, not to interrupt. I saw something the other day. A guy posted on one of the farrier pages, and he showed his basically his books from 1980 sometime, somewhere in there.
Was it American or was it?
It was American.
Okay.
And when you did the math, with inflation today,
He was making more.
he was making more than.
Right. I was getting $23 to shoe a horse, and it seemed like I had more money than I got now.
Isn't
And I
that
get
cra-
175 now.
It's crazy.
Yep. And 175 is not a lot for the U.S.,
No.
but it's a lot for Missouri. Where I live in Missouri, it's a lot.
It's very. I was floored. I was talking to Craig Turnka, and I was telling him a mutual friend sent a horse down there, and a vet, and she needed her horse shot. He did it for her, charged her 150, and I'm like, I'm charging more than Craig. Like,
Yeah.
that's crazy. Like,
Well.
to me.
You know, it's the area you live. So do you live in Florida now?
No. I don't like big bugs or humidity.
Okay.
I live in Idaho.
And they don't have big bugs?
No,
I thought the mosquitoes weighed 20 pounds.
no, that's more towards the Canadian side.
Okay, all right. All right.
Where I'm at is actually and I don't want to tell everybody because we've already got a problem with people moving
Okay.
there.
So
but-
we need to bleep.
yeah, no, it's but I'm from a little town called Lewiston, and it's literally considered, like, you can look it up. It's like in one of the top 10 places to survive an apocalypse. Like, who would have thought? But it's like in a banana belt because you're at like 1,000 feet sea level.
Oh, wow.
You're right on the river. It gets a little hot in the summer, but you can drive up to the mountains. You know, you're 30 minutes away
Is it a
from.
big city?
No, I mean, we got a Walmart, North 40, some restaurants, but not huge.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of it's been a long time since I went through Missouri, like an equivalent, but
All right. All right. Now, are you a married man?
yes, I just had my first son.
Oh, nice. How long have you been married?
We got married in 22.
22.
in May of 22, and I'm extremely lucky. I was extremely immature. You know, when I was 25, we met when I just before I turned 25, and I was very, very immature. And she does bring out the better in me.
So she raised you.
Basically, although I would argue, and I've seen this with other people, not that it's the right, but, and maybe, I don't know what you think, but you shouldn't marry a person for them to be your dad or your mother.
I agree.
You should marry them because they make you a better person and you're better with them.
Yep. Yeah. Yep.
And she's an ER nurse.
Okay.
So I'm not completely dumb.
So could you work with your wife?
I don't think that'd be a good plan.
Why?
She could. I'm a hothead.
Really?
I still run that risk of, we were putting together a round pen, and I had a way that I was doing it, and she was suggesting a different way to do it. And so we were just married, and I was trying to be, you know, a good husband. So I tried to do it her way, and it just made me mad because it wasn't the way I did it. And so at one point I pitched the panel across the,
Oh, man.
and she looks at me and she goes, "When you can start acting like an adult, we'll talk. I'm going to the house." And like just walked up to the house, and she knows how to handle me. She left me down there. I banged around and cussed and and finally got it up, you know. Probably worked twice as hard banging around, cussing, and losing my mind if I'd have just calmed down and just mellowed out. And I'm getting better.
So you've learned.
I'm learning.
All right.
But it's a skill.
Mm.
It's a skill to be calm and.
Well, so one of my takes on the modern world is, if you can work with your spouse, if you and your spouse are pulling the cart in the same direction, I think it makes for such a strong family. So,
shared common goals.
Yeah. Well, and I have a lot of people say, "Well, I couldn't work with my wife," and it always interests me. I'm like, "Well, why would you marry her if you couldn't even work with her?"
I've found it's like my brother and I. My brother and I are good friends. Love my brother. We discovered I went to work actually for him. He was managing a mill, and this is before I started shoeing.
What kind of mill?
It was a seed cleaning mill.
Okay, so in ag, not a wood mill or something.
No, we were in ag, and we discovered that we do not like each other working.
Okay.
And I think it's a personality conflict. He's a rule follower.
So is there a work Caleb and a real world Caleb?
Yeah, I would say I definitely have. I'm much more relaxed. Like here, I'm far more relaxed and being around my peers.
I thought you were pretty chill. I got to admit, I can't see you throwing a panel.
Yeah, I know. You know, we have to admit our faults, and I have, you know, that panel. I lost my dad in 21.
Oh man.
He was 56, no health issues, just gone.
From how?
Believe it or not, COVID.
Wow.
So he went into the hospital, and not to go down that rabbit hole, but he went into the hospital.
And this was during isolation where he couldn't have anybody with him.
Yeah. So he went into the doctor's office. He had 104 fever, 80% oxygen, and shortness of breath. My wife's an ER nurse. If you came in exhibiting those symptoms today, they would admit you, and they would run a D-dimer on you, and they would.
A D-dimer.
A D-dimer is a way that they check for clotting.
Okay.
So COVID was notorious for clotting. In fact, more people died from clotting than, like, that's why they all ended up on respirators. It was a clotting issue. It wasn't they'd get clots in their lungs and boom, they're done.
Okay.
I know of one other person that's exactly what happened to them.
All right.
A D-dimer, a normal, and don't hold me to the numbers, but normal D-dimer level is around 600.
Okay.
When 2 days later, 3 days later, after he went to the hospital and went home, when they picked him up in the ambulance and got him to the ER, he was at 50% oxygen, and his D-dimer level was 3,600.
Oof, almost half.
Like,
or
like
6 times.
yeah,
6
like
times.
yeah. So he was, and so He just kept crashing. They couldn't, CPR life.
And did you get to see him as he was going?
No.
Because of COVID?
No. It's kind of a weird, you look back at your life and I don't know if you've experienced this, but do you think people are aware subconsciously when their time's close?
I don't have enough experience to answer that. So I've been in some pretty hairy situations, but I've never felt like I was going to die. So I don't have any way to answer that, Caleb. What do you think?
Well, I've been across it a couple of times.
So you think your dad knew?
I think subconsciously, because he said something to me like 3 or 4 days before he passed. I was up there shoeing horses, and I stopped in to see how he was doing, and we weren't particularly close. But we kind of had. He was a good man. It was more of the fact that the I'm trying to phrase it right. The arrogance of youth.
Okay.
You raise a son to be independent and self-sufficient, and you do your best there, and then sometimes you start to clash heads, especially if you're alike.
Okay. Yep.
And so we struggled with that, but I stopped by to see him, and he said something. I said, because I was like, yeah, I'm gonna marry Sid, and he goes, well, something about, well, but if I don't die first or something like that. And I said, you're not allowed to die. You have to be at my wedding. And he goes, oh, you just want the insurance or some smart ass comment like that, And we're very sarcastic. Like, that's our sense of humor. It was like very dark.
Yeah. And
I was like, no, you actually have to be at my wedding because you've got to be there.
So, man, your wedding was emotional, huh?
Very, very emotional. So actually, we've done something. He had a Stetson hat, and every photo shoot that we've done, so our engagement photos, our wedding photos, and then we did a shoot with my son when he was born, and every one of those, I've worn it or had that hat with me. But then, he was gone, and so I've seen people do that several times in death, like they die super sudden or you don't see it coming.
And was your dad still in the egg business?
Yeah, he was. That was the other thing. I didn't realize what a footprint he'd left, and you don't realize what you have until it's gone. And so, like, I look at, I'd love to bring this into the conversation at this point, because your relationship with your son Cody is, I think every father and son would strive for that relationship.
It's amazing. So, my view on that is, if you're going to do a family business, if you're going to work with your wife, with your son's wife, with your daughter and her husband, and we have to make all this work. So I will never let a horse's foot interfere with my family. I would never let a round pin interfere with my family. So basically, if you shoe with your family, there's going to be a fit on a shoe that they don't like. There's going to be a trim on a foot that you don't like. There's going to be a bad horse that your son-in-law handles in a way that you don't like. There's going to be a way that your daughter-in-law parked the rig that you wouldn't have parked it there. And if you are such a micromanager that you can't handle that, then those things make you mad. And then it colors everything. And so pretty soon it's coloring your Sunday dinners. Pretty soon it's coloring your Thanksgiving. Pretty soon it's like, I can't believe he drove that 4 City Head whenever it definitely needed a 5 Slim,
Right.
Those things don't matter. The big picture matters is I get to hug my granddaughter,
Right.
And I get to see my grandson grow up. I get to hug my daughter. All of those are happening because the little things don't matter.
And that was pretty much what I learned out of my dad's death. I got hurt. I had 6 months that's how I got into podcasting, and all of this was I literally was in a brace for 6 months.
And how did you get hurt?
I was trying to open a coconut. The knife slipped.
Oh man.
And
Wow.
So I thought it was fine.
Where were you at?
I was in the kitchen.
No, you were in Bahamas though, or?
No, I was in the kitchen.
You bought a coconut in Idaho.
Yeah, in a coconut in Idaho. And I know I hadn't even got a drink yet. I wasn't even. I was stone sober. The knife slipped, and my wife, you know, she's an ER nurse, and at that time we were renting from my doctor. And so my wife calls the doctor and she goes, "Hey, could you come over and take a look at Caleb real quick?"
So you had the knife in a vise and you're hitting coconut on it, or how does
No,
it?
I
Tell me
was.
how this. Tell me how this happened.
Well, yeah, you know, explain. As my dad would say, "What were you thinking?" And I'd say, "I wasn't." But I had it like this, and I was trying to like, yeah,
Ooh,
yeah, yeah,
and a big sharp knife.
yeah. Why would you have anything less than a big sharp knife?
Okay, so it slipped off the coconut, got your
Yeah,
arm.
got you. And my doctor came over, stitched me up at the kitchen table, threw her tools in a bottle of vodka, you know, poured a vodka in. Her husband's like videoing it. He's like, "This is our first patient." And she's like, "No, it's not." He's like, "Our first human. We've stitched the dogs, but not." So I, I, uh, I got through it. And I thought I was fine. I went back to work, and I was pulling shoes, and I went like that, and the tendon snapped.
So it had severed the tendon, but not all the way.
Not all the way. It nicked it, and then when I put a bunch of force on it, it was dry, hard. And so you know, but that time period where I had to stay.
So what did they do for you? Did they have to transplant tendon, or did they?
No, they were able to repair it with existing tendons, and I haven't had an issue with it until recently. I got a bad case of tendonitis because of I was holding my tongs incorrectly, and I had bad habits, and they affect.
You know, tong fit is something so few people give any real. Once you get to a certain level, you realize how important it is. But if you're trying to hold 5/16 with 1/4 inch tongs,
Right.
or if your tongs don't fit, your left hand and left arm take a absolute beating.
Well, and I'm learning. You know, I was a cold banger for so long. I did 8 years of it, and it is so hard on your body. I don't know why anyone wouldn't. I would heat up every shoe. I get pissy when I have to like.
Well, don't get pissy.
But you know what I mean. Like it's like, oh man, I've got this one horse and he was pretty rank, and I probably should not do him. That'd probably be the smarter. But and it was just with him. He had a pretty round foot, and it was literally I'd open the shoe, close the heel, and that was about all the time he had. And if you didn't get it done in that time,
Yep.
and even drugged, you had half hour,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And I told the owners, I said, until he stands better, he's not going to get,
A good shoeing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like there, I think that's one thing. And I would ask this because I don't know the right answer. And it's hard for someone like me who's starting out in the journey, right? On the way to journeyman, and then basically you're in kindergarten, and you're trying to up your skills and become a better, which I guess is a life journey
Yes.
in general. But knowing when to let it go.
So if the shoe stays on, the horse stays sound, you really can't argue with the results, right?
Right.
Or how it happened. I had a barn with about 18 head that I was able to do because I was able to do one bad horse named Bon Jovi. And Bon Jovi was a rank horse. And he was a cutting horse. On the front end, you could not pull him forward. Like it was,
Oh, really?
you would not let you pull it forward no matter what. And if you tried, he would come up and he would paw you. On the hind end, while you're under him, and he's a reserve world champion. I mean, this is a really nice cutting horse. On the hind end, you'd be working on him, and he would jump, get the other foot off the ground, suck you under, and kick you out.
Right.
So the gentleman called me in October 1994. I'm still shooting his horses. He's my last customer, really.
1994.
Yeah, he called. We had just moved to Lamar, Missouri. He said, "Hey, are you willing to do a bad horse?" And you know, we're fighting over the pork and the pork and beans, so I'm willing to do a bad horse. And so I show up, very nice barn. The previous shoer had put one shoe on with 3 nails and left a note saying never again because this horse was so rank. And I got through him. And I shot Bon Jovi for about 10 years. And every time he hurt me. But because I was able to do him, I was able to do the other 17 horses that were beautiful and good. But by the time we were done, I was 1.1 cc of Dromosedan, 1.1 cc of Torbejizic, and still walking around like a cat. And I got to where to crease him, or I mean to clinch him, I'd walk him out in the arena after I got the shoes nailed on. I'd walk him out in the arena. I'd twist my nails,
Yeah, you.
and I would simply clench the nails. So whenever you looked at his
Oh,
job,
so you could
I
reach
could
in
put
the
it in the
sand.
sand. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you looked at the shoeing job,
Look like.
it was horrible looking. Like you would be embarrassed to say I shod that horse.
Right.
It was quality work. The shoe was shaped right. The foot was trimmed right on the bottom. The edges were rounded from the bottom to give me the perimeter I wanted.
Right.
But nothing was dressed. Clinches were not clean. I mean, just because he wouldn't let me, even with drugs. So I'd done everything I knew how to do. And at that time, I didn't have a Novell headstall, which if you know about those.
No, I don't.
Well, okay, we'll do that story next. But I had done everything I knew how to do except for throw him down. I didn't want to throw a horse down that was worth more than my house, right?
Right.
So I told the owner, and I said, listen, sir, the only thing I haven't tried is throwing your horse. He said, well, let's try it. I'm like, okay, well, you need to be there for that. And so we went one night, and it was me and my helper, my wife, and this gentleman. And we threw the horse, and Bon Jovi, I mean, he was like landing a fish with claws, you know. And he's pawing and swinging and kicking, and he just barely missed my helper's head. And the owner of the horse, he said, hey, everybody stand up. And we all stood up. We let the horse up. He says, you never have to touch that horse again. And he turned him out, and we quit using that horse and shoeing that horse at that time.
It's funny. So do you think today's day and age, it's changed a little bit, but I was talking to a younger shoer and apprentice, or he's a journeyman now, and I was with Sam Durham.
Yeah, I know Sam. Real
Yeah.
well.
He was a journeyman, but he's about my age, I think, and worked for Brian Strelo and stuff. And Sam was talking about tying horses up, and you know how you do rank horses without drugs and rank mules and all that. And Sam's pretty handy, and I had to learn that too because I was in the middle of nowhere and I was hungry, right?
Yeah.
And so I see some of these younger guys coming, and they're like, "You tie them up that way, like." Because like I feel like people are more inclined to go get dorm gel now, and more inclined to.
Yeah, well, there's those that dorm gel doesn't work, and for us, horsemanship is always the answer.
Yeah.
And if you can do it with horsemanship, great. But you know, there are people that are crazy. There are people that will pull a gun out and shoot you because they're just crazy.
Right.
Well, there are horses that are crazy as well, and we don't, or at least the general population looks at a horse more like a car than as a living, breathing creature with a brain, right?
Right.
So there are some things that can't be fixed, you
Right.
know? And so if you get a guy that's crazy enough, they put him in handcuffs or a straitjacket. So you're tying him up. And if I have so I run a horseshoeing school, so we have to do rank horses for a living. I've made my whole career doing rank horses. So it's just.
What do you do in your school? I mean, I've watched some of your videos, and they are impressive because, I mean, I learned something. I watch how you handle horses, and I would say that, like I said earlier, I'm a hothead, but horses have made me learn to mellow out.
Yeah, because a horse senses it.
Yeah, and they're not going to put up with you losing your crap.
Right. And if you do, you really got to fight.
Yeah, and there are horses. I got a couple on my list. I swear I should just kick them in the belly right at the start of the program, and I'm sure people will be like, "Oh my God!" I'm like, but it's just like people. I was one of those kids that, if I didn't get a little bit of a shellacking every once in a while, you know, and there's those horses out there, and then I've got other horses on my book. If you look at them wrong, you know, but if you just mellow,
so you've learned how to read the horse.
Right.
Right. So you know, it's the same thing. I had 2 kids, and I could spank Cody with a rasp, and he'd say that doesn't hurt. And I could look sideways at my daughter, and she's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. What did I do wrong?"
Right.
And so you have to be able to read the horse, and understand this is what works on this horse, this is what works on that horse, this is what works on this horse. Because there's no one answer.
Right.
There's not a twitch may really work well on this horse, and it may turn into a 6-hour job and a hospital bill on this horse.
Right. Well, and I think I kind of have a rule, like I'll smack a horse once, like, okay, wake up, cut it out, you know, whatever it happens to be. Usually it's leaning. I'll, you know, pop them and like take my hand and hit them in the belly, you know, or if they strike or something like that, I'll get, you know, which is basically what would happen in the pasture if they did that to the head mare. Like, she's not going to put up with it.
Actually, be more violent.
Yeah, way more violent than anything but I'll do that once, maybe twice. But then if that's not working and he's not getting any better, it's time to rethink the plan. You can't sit there and wail on him for 20 minutes.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Because that's not horsemanship. That's just
Yeah.
that and I was really lucky. I got around, I was riding horses and training horses in high school, and I rode with the vaqueros.
Oh, very cool.
And they were some of the handiest guys out there, and they're a little more mellow than like the charro. The charro is pretty aggressive
Yeah.
and violent.
Yeah, I went to the Charro National Finals in
Oh,
Mexico.
really?
Yeah. There's some cowboys now.
They're handy, and they get the same result. They both have nice horses. Like, I wouldn't argue that a charro doesn't ride a nice horse, and
Right, right.
vaquero, but the method they get there is very different.
Oh, yeah.
And I really enjoyed, my buddy was always, he was the kind of guy, there was this old mule that was just a kicker. And they sent him down to him, and he worked. 2 years later, he came by, and that mule was standing out in the pasture, heard his voice, and come barreling over just to see him. And his approach to horses was they have a very unique approach, like they're common sense. Like, it's so common sense, it's almost so painfully simple. He had this horse that the minute you hit the cinch, he went to like 3 different trainers, and he hit the cinch, and that horse would fall over.
Wow.
And he wouldn't get up. Would not get up. They tried a hot shot. Wouldn't get up. He'd lay there on the ground and wouldn't move. And they'd finally unsaddle him, and he'd still lay there. And about 20, 30 minutes after he was unsaddled, he'd get up, shake himself off, and walk around.
Oh, man, that horse learned something, hadn't he?
Yeah. And he's just like, over.
So how'd your vaquero fix it?
Well, I come over one day, and he's riding around on that horse. And I said, how'd you get that done? And he goes, oh, he fall down. So I go to the house and get a glass of water.
Yeah.
I'm like, water?
I wondered if it would be a
Yeah.
trick.
He says, I pour it down his nose and I hold it in there. He think he drowning. He come off the ground quick.
Yeah. I had a horse used to lay down and across the creek, and I was a little kid, and my dad was ready for him and done it, and that horse popped up, and I don't think that horse ever slept on his side again.
And people that don't use their horses, I think it's very different. You know, I was raised ranching, cowboying. I definitely have become much better at caring for the animal. I've become softer.
Sure.
You know, and
Age does that to you.
Yeah, you realize that you don't have to be. You have nothing to prove. There's nothing. You mellow out, and I feel like, and you mellow more and more. I think you become more mature, and like you were talking earlier about letting it go. Like, it's not worth losing your family over.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not worth. Who cares? Let it go. Don't remember it. Forget about it.
Yeah, yeah.
Don't tally mark. Don't make a tally book of all the things that people do to you.
Yep.
Because it's a miserable way to live.
Yep. So, are you a Christian?
Yeah.
Oh, good. All right. All right.
I am a little bit, like, I was raised very, very Christian.
Okay. But not Mormon.
No.
Okay.
No. I was very, 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 very traditional. And then it's not that the church is a bad thing. It's that sometimes the hypocritical part is hard.
Sure.
Which maybe
all men fall short.
Oh, yeah.
And so even your preacher.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I had some bad experiences that way, and so, but I don't think that shook my faith in God. I don't think you can do this job. You have too many close calls to call it luck.
Yeah. Well, and you just had a child, right?
Yeah.
That's a pretty hard thing to imagine without a creator, huh?
Well, I was thinking about this the other day, people, evolution and things like that. And I was looking at because I was getting ready for the journeyman test, and the anatomy of the hoof alone.
It's incredible.
I don't, like, the Venus plexus, the solar plexus.
It has to be designed.
Yeah.
It couldn't have evolved from a single couple cells. If you truly look at the argument of evolution, it is one of the strangest theories to have actually turned into a accepted school of thought.
It takes more faith to believe in my opinion.
Yes, than it does creation. So I'm a young Earth creationist. I believe the Earth's about 6,000 years old and change.
I would, yeah.
So there's 2,000 years from Adam to Abraham, 2,000 years from Abraham to Jesus, 2,000 years from Jesus till now. And the flood story, well, you can see some of the stuff that happened in Mount St. Helens, some
Right.
of the stuff that happened after Helene.
Right.
So the flood story explains our topography. The flood
Right.
story explains the striations in the Grand Canyon, or the separation of the continents. And I think the flood happened about 1,500 years after Adam, or 1,500 years after creation. And so the planet as we know it is more or less 4,500 years old. Now, when you tell people that, they think you're dim, you know?
Right.
But if you look at creation, they have to have all these gaps. There's these huge assumptions that time solved that problem.
Right.
But someone said it'd be like throwing a deck of cards and having it land as a house every single time,
And it does, and again, they, like, to your point, they look at you like you're dumb, and it's like, wait a minute, show me where the evolutionary chain, lower life forms on the bottom, higher life forms on the top, exists. It doesn't exist anywhere.
And it's not happening. We should have so many transitional species.
Right.
The picture of the monkey going to the next one.
Yeah.
We really should have, because there's millions of monkeys, and there's millions of humans, but there should be millions of the second ape, millions of the Neanderthal, millions. There should be millions of these transitional species, if that could have happened. And the missing link is not one male or one female in that chain that then turned from an ape into us.
Well, and how, like, I believe in fate to a certain extent. I believe that our days are numbered. I believe that there's a plan. I believe in free will, which is kind of ironic, because they say, well, how does that work if God knows everything? Like, how does free will work? I'm like, well, he allows you to make choices, but he knows the choices you're gonna, like, it's a weird, like, it's so big it's hard to wrap your head around it.
It's like the discussion of time travel.
Yes.
It really is.
Yeah.
Pretty dang hard to get it all the gears to mesh. Yes, I agree. I think that you are allowed to do as you will, free will, but I do think God knows what you're going to do, and I think He knows where I'll end up and when I'll end up and how it'll end up, and He knows all that. The hairs on your head are numbered. so and my head was easy to count.
Well, I think that without a God, there's no reason to be moral.
Yes, except for I have atheist friends that
I'm not saying you can't be moral.
Right, but and I wonder. I've asked one of them. I said, why don't you just go steal, or
Right.
And he said, well, it's not right. And so yeah, that's a good question. But for me, the biggest thing is knowing that I have a purpose, knowing that there is a reason why I am in this place at this time doing this thing, and believing that that's for a better reason, for a higher power.
For a young guy like me, because you talk about purpose, and it's hard because we're trying to advance our career, make more money, provide for the family, but then you have to find that balance where you're able to give your family what they need to time.
Oh.
What did you do? How did that work?
This is easy. You start with a number. Don't start by selling your body with X number of horses. So are you as busy as you want to be in your shoeing business?
Yeah.
Okay. Whenever a new customer calls, what do you tell them? You tell them no?
Not normally.
What do you do?
I usually, it depends. Sometimes I'll tell them no. Depends on what they have and where they're located. If they're in an area that I can.
They're 10 miles away. They got 5 horses. What do you tell them?
I usually will take that one.
You'll take that one.
I'll.
But you're already as busy as you want to be.
Yeah.
So why would you take it?
That's a good question.
Well, the reason is because you're young and your back can do 5 more horses. What I really suggest a young guy do is they start with a number. And so to make the math simple, let's say $120,000 a year for gross income. And I don't want to talk about the cost of shoeing a horse or all the other stuff, but let's just say I want to make $120,000 gross.
Right.
That means I got to make $10,000 a month. So if I can do 120 horses, if I can do 1,000 horses in a year for 120 apiece, I will make $120,000. So that's simple math, right?
Right.
So if I have to do 1,000 horses and I work 50 weeks in a year, that means I got to do 20 horses in a week. Okay. So once I reach the number, and if I'm doing it on a 6-week schedule, that means 6 times 20. I have to have 120 horses on my books. So once I reach that number, then the lady calls 10 miles away at 5 horses. Yes, ma'am, I'm happy to do you, but I get 140. So now I've gone to $140. She says yes or no. I don't have to say no. You don't want to say no. If you say no, you're basically rejecting somebody. Nobody likes rejection.
Right.
So I don't say no. I tell her it'll be 140. If she says yes, I figured out how to put 5 more horses into my already 20 horses a week. I'm already killing myself, right?
Right. Right.
So that's being facetious. You know, obviously
Right.
20 horses is not a massive week. But anyway, I put those 5 more horses into my books, and at that point, I tell all of my current customers, by the way, next time it will be 140. So I gave myself a price raise at that time. And if I lose, so a $20 raise on 120 would be 18%, 16%.
Yeah.
Okay, let's call it 18%. So I give myself an 18% raise. In a perfect world, I would lose 18% of my business, and I would still make the same amount of money, but I'd only be doing 82% of the work. And that means I would be able to add those horses in eventually. That almost never happens. You almost never lose the customers.
Right.
So, but I have a quality of life because now I'm only doing 20 horses a week for 50 weeks a year. I have 2 weeks off. I'm making my number. It's not about money, it's about lifestyle.
Right.
We turn away so many students in the Heartland, and I could hire instructors, I could build barns, I could have more money, but I don't need to eat more. I can make my number with this many students for this many months, and so that's where I start. And if you can incorporate that into your life, man, you'll get longevity, you'll get a sense of happiness, and you'll get a sense of control that young guys don't usually have.
And then I think, and I'm sure you experience this too. When you've been poor and broke, it's very hard, and I think there's a fear. And for me, it's not about like doing another 10 head or the money. There's a fear that I'm going to lose something.
Sure. And if your phone doesn't ring in January, you think you lost your whole business, huh?
Oh yeah. Oh dude. And sometimes it's like, okay, I'm sorry. I'm so swamped. They're like, can you get my horse in this week? I'm like, dude, I can't even see my eyeballs.
Yeah. So you're selling your body because it's young, but it's not always going to be young, Caleb.
Right.
So I have 2 brand new knees. And the reason I have 2 brand new knees is because my 55-year-old body had to cash a check that my 20-year-old body wrote.
Oh.
And if you don't think long term, you won't have longevity in this. And I'm an old guy talking to a young guy, and when I was a young guy, I didn't listen to the old guy. But
well, I have to make some decisions. I had club feet as a kid.
Oh wow! So you might have a shorter.
And the crazy thing is that like I was talking to someone else about this. Shoeing horses is like a drug. I haven't found anything that's kept my attention
Right.
like it does. Like you can't figure it out in a day. You can't figure it out in a lifetime.
You'll never do the perfect horse.
Right.
And at a certain point, so right now you're at this point where your skill is going up and your ability is going up and your body is letting you. But at a certain point, you're going to get to this precipice where your skill and your knowledge will continue to go, but your body won't let you anymore. So I was here at 47. 47 was probably my last year of being physically strong. That was probably my precipice.
Right.
And then after 47, my knees started going so bad I couldn't hardly do it as much as I could. Even though my knowledge and my skill continued to hold and maybe gain a little, my body won't let you.
Right.
So, and if you have, I don't know what club feet are in a human, is that?
The feet basically rock in, kind of like a horse. So a horse goes like this, technically.
Okay.
This, ours would go like this, and it would be, I guess, in
5th metatarsal?
Yeah, right.
Or
so
yeah,
your ankle, which would I'm trying to remember. I'm having a brain fart.
So on your tarsal bones?
Yes.
Or the end of your tibia?
So in a horse, it's called it's the hock, right?
Yep.
The hock. Yeah. So um, I get hock injections.
Okay. And
So
did you have special shoes or braces?
I had braces. I was in casts until I was 2. They cut the Achilles tendon
Wow.
on both feet. Um, I won the lotto in a lot of ways. There's about 1 in 1,000 people will have a club foot, and I had 2, and take 1,000 of those 1, and you get
So
I'm
you're one of a million.
1 in a million chance. And then the fact that I walk, the fact that I have the quality of life that I
Can
do.
you jog?
No.
All right. And do you hurt?
Yeah, every
Okay.
day.
And do you hurt worse after 10 head?
Yes.
So our conversation we just had about the
Right.
number is more important for you because the rest of your body is going to still feel good whenever you're
That's what's my
40.
back feels good. I feel great everywhere, but I'll hit, and we're looking at it's sometime in the future when I can find the right surgeon, because it's a very specific subset. Um, there's some things now that they're able to do that will give me that longevity. But to your point, we sell our body, and if I want to keep doing this,
Yep.
and you're right, and I wouldn't even argue it's just hard. It's hard when you're young.
So what?
That's true. I guess it's an excuse, isn't it?
Yeah. Well,
Really, ultimately.
you can justify almost anything and you can get an excuse for almost anything. But there's a lot of things that are hard that when you get through it, it was so worth it.
Right.
Military school was hard. Boot camp was hard. My school is freaking hard. But you get to the end of it, you get to the other end of it, and you look back and say, look what I just survived. You know,
What do you see, talking about hardship and the way I was raised, like people, I've had guys come work with me for like a day or two, and they're like, oh, my back hurts. I don't want to do this anymore.
Mhm.
And it's like, dude, I'm hurting. I'm beat up. But that doesn't mean we stop. We stop when the job's done.
right?
So do you see that? Have you seen a trend? I mean, your school's been coming around for so long. What do you see?
I've been teaching since 1992. And
Wow.
so quite honestly, the 18-year-old that came to my school in 1992 is not the same 18-year-old that I'm getting in 2025. You know, it is unfortunately for our world, I do believe that has been a little bit of a transition. You know, a farm-raised kid that was raised without television, raised without a phone, raised without a TV, or without modern stuff, and raised with a father that loved him enough to spank him.
Right.
That guy is becoming more and more rare. And so whenever the wrong guy shows up at my horseshoe school, there's a come to Jesus meeting, and I ask for their soul every day. I'm going to work you to death if you come to my school. So hopefully those that aren't willing to work don't come. And we usually draw the very finest people, which makes my job easy. But it is there's been a change.
I think one of the coolest things when I came here, I had a very preconceived idea about women farriers. I had a very preconceived idea. I had been around one, and had arms the size of my thighs and had a mullet, and
Oh, nice.
yeah, so I kind of assumed that was the only one I ever run into. I was like, well, and I come here, and these young ladies they're amazing.
Yeah.
They're badass. They're forging and beautiful. Like a lot of them are very pretty, and I'm like, this is. You want to shoe horses? Why do you want to shoe horses?
My class, I've been getting classes now where it's more than 50% female.
Wow, and I'd heard that the trend.
Yep.
That more and more women are doing it.
I used to get one woman a year, maybe one woman every other year, because Heartland was not a place where a female would go.
Right.
But it seems like, so my wife's been shoeing me since '95.
Oh.
My daughter-in-law came to horseshoeing school, and that's where she met Cody. My daughter shoes horses, and her husband came to horseshoeing school, and that's how they met. So I've never had a prejudice against women farriers. We didn't attract very many. And now we're attracting some because there's most people that come to the Heartland don't come accidentally. You know, most of them come because they've heard about us or another farrier sent them. and they're really willing to push themselves. And some of my best students have been female students.
I was hearing about one. I forget the name, but
We had one this year, Special P, Jordan.
yeah, and that might have been.
Yeah, so she's from California, and she set the bar, and everybody chased her all year long. And
That's awesome, really.
it really is awesome. Yeah.
Especially, and it's amazing. I think there's a misconception. I know I had misconceptions coming to the AFA convention. I never went to shoeing school. I was cowboying and
Have you been to school at all yet?
no.
Okay, all right, interesting.
I've never gone.
How long have you been shoeing horses for a living? How long have you been making a living doing that?
About 8 years. It'll be 9.
So since you were 23.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, shit, no, longer than that, I guess, because I went full time. I was shoeing 21. I was starting to pick up pretty hard in 21, and I think in 16, it was 2016, that I
Full time.
went full time.
And never haven't been to school.
Never been to school.
Yeah, just think how you could have cut your trajectory short.
You have no idea. When I found the AFA last year, so like I said, I told you a little bit before. His name's Paul McGann. He called me, and he's like, I don't call anybody, but one of my clients is like, he really needs help, and he's really discouraged, and he's frustrated, and he needs somebody. He needs a mentor. And I'd been burned by several different farriers,
Trying to learn.
and what happened was, you did their work, and you didn't learn a lot, and unfortunately, it was about putting on a specific shoe to fix a problem, not upping your skill to fix that problem.
So not understanding biomechanics or
100%.
basics or trim or any of that. Just this shoe fixes that. Okay.
Using gimmicks to, and so Paul called me. Dusty Franklin was going to be in Boise. This would have been last year. And he goes, hey, it's Paul. You want to go to Dusty's clinic? And I was like, Paul the horseshoer? And he goes, yeah. And I was so busy.
And did you know who Dusty Franklin was?
I did. I'd been following Dusty. I'd been following you, and I was trying to, I was trying to emulate and trying to understand
Through YouTube.
through YouTube, through Facebook, through Instagram. I'd see these guys doing, and I saw the shiny little mark around the outside of the shoe, and I'd try, but I didn't understand fitting. I didn't understand shape. I didn't even have a concept of it. I really didn't understand anatomy.
Mm-hmm.
I was pretty illiterate, really. And I said, Paul, I'm not blowing you off. I'm really not, because I would love to go to Dusty. I said, it's tomorrow in Boise. It's 5 hours away, and I've rescheduled the clients that I have tomorrow already once, and I can't do that again. And he said, okay. And I said, but don't take that as like I don't want to. And we started talking a little bit more while I'm driving, and he goes, so why haven't you called me? And I said, well, do you want the truth? And he goes, yeah. I said, well, I've heard journeymen are assholes. And since then, I have come to realize that I'd both been lied to and had a very, very misconception. I was telling you.
So there was one journeyman with big arms and a mullet, and
that wasn't, they're not even certified.
I'm just saying that one journeyman colored your.
Yes.
Your.
Yeah, and to be honest, we didn't really have any journeymen. It was more of the people I learned from didn't like them. And so therefore, you learn from people.
Was it insecurity?
I would say that 100%. If you're not coming to the AFA, if you're not getting out, you have a pre-certification clinic that you do every year. Dusty does one. If you're not getting out here and not doing this, it's because you're insecure.
Yeah.
And it's because,
well, if you really color all journeymen with the same brush and say they're horrible people, that's probably insecurity.
Right. And I would say,
if you're not coming here, maybe you can't get here yet, but you should.
I came here for the first time last year, and
Okay.
I'm now like hardcore for it. Like I'm probably a little bit excessive on that, because I went through so much, 8 years And now I'm like, if I'd have just not been dumb and not been arrogant, because I had arrogant. I was, you know, it's youth, man. It's, I,
Well, it's also exposure.
yeah,
Because if you'd have been exposed to a nice journeyman,
yeah.
then you know it might have changed things
Well,
early.
and when I got around Paul, like he came down to my house. I'd never had a farrier. He's like, hey, can I swing by your house today? And I was like, yeah. He's like, you want? And I'm sitting there shoeing horses, and he's sitting there watching me. He's like, I can't just watch you, and he just jumped in and just like, and trust me, he didn't try to change my technique
But you
that
probably
day.
learned more in an hour than you'd learned in a month,
Yeah,
huh? Yeah.
yeah. He showed me what was he. We did a mule both at the same time. He was on the back, off the kid,
Offline.
yeah, offline, and I was on the front, and we did the mule in like 30 minutes, and I'm just sitting there just like, oh, this is nuts. And then the fact that he could walk to the anvil, because I always wanted to know how they did that. He just walked to the anvil
Shape it.
and come back and nail it up. And I'm sitting there going, like making little, I had a trail to the anvil and back to the horse. And I'm like, I wanted to know. And so that like that little fire in me, so we kind of started hanging out. He's like, all right, you're going to take front shoes and turn them into hinds, hind shoes into fronts.
Yep.
You're going to start drawing clips. He said, you're going to take a shoe and you're going to draw clips all the way around the shoe and you're going to pitch it in the pile. There's no and he said, take a used shoe.
Right.
You're not going to wreck a brand new shoe. And then we came to the convention last year, and he told his wife and I told mine. I said, we're going to find out if we like each other, because we're going to split a hotel room. And by the end of the week, like I'd do anything for him. Like
Cool.
at this point, like I feel that I think he'd do the same for me. Like,
Nice.
you know, and that's that brotherhood. And all these guys here are that way. I haven't met one that wasn't like, if you call them and say, hey, I'm having trouble with X, Y, and Z. I've heard that guys have said, oh yeah, I was having trouble. I called Chris Gregory or Dusty Franklin or whoever it was, and just I went down to their house and stayed.
Yep.
Like,
Yeah, it's an amazing trade, and one of the things that we're blessed with is there's more work than
right,
nobody's hurting for work. If you're willing to shoe horses, you have a job.
right.
And so you don't have to be cutthroat. You don't have to be protective of your skills or your knowledge or any of that, because you know there's more than enough work for everybody. And so
Yeah. Well, and so going forward, what do you want to see? Like, where do you want to see your school? Where do you want to see what do you want to see in the trade?
so I am a very traditional man, and I've maybe glued on 10 shoes my whole career. I'm just not. I'm way more likely to build a shoe for a foot than I am to modify some kind of a glue-on contraption. So it's just, I don't want to see those lost. We still forge and coat fires at the school.
I want to try that.
That's so expensive. That's so hard to do. Our students are allowed to have the forge 24/7 so they can build those skills, because you can shoe horses very, very successfully and not even have a forge. But if you do have those skills, if you maintain those traditions, you're going to be so much better down the line. And if the wheels fall off, a man that knows how to heat a piece of metal and shape it on an anvil is going to be a very, very valuable resource.
Do you find, I've kind of noticed this, do you find when you show up to a place and you pull out the forge and you show that professionalism? I think it gives me a sense of pride
Yep.
that I didn't have before.
Well, and it sets you apart. So I started shoeing in '87, and I started hot shoeing really in like 1990, really. So I had 3 years of just cold banging on the rodeo trail. And then when I started hot shoeing, it really sets you apart, because if you want to get good at anything, you look at what the good guys do and how they do it. You try to emulate that. And so the best guys in the world, I've shot horses on 6 continents. The best guys in the world shoe hot. The best guys in the world make shoes. The best guys in the world pull their own clips. And so all of those things are what I try to bring so that I can be amongst the best guys in the world. And all the reasons to cold shoe are about humans. It is faster. It takes less equipment. It is, you can argue that it's easier. It's easier to fit because you don't necessarily know what fit is if you're a cold shoer oftentimes. You're opening and closing, making sure they don't bleed, right? But you're not really fitting a toe quarter and fitting a heel quarter and, really getting that perimeter. So the reasons to hot shoe are really about the horse. It takes longer, it takes more equipment, it takes more skill. Um, it is a lot harder to do in the early days. The
Right.
shaping of the shoe is not eventually, but in the early days it definitely is. And so you have to be willing to push yourself past that point so that you can learn how to do it. Um, so, for me now, I can't imagine being a coal banger, but I know a lot of coal bangers made a very good living that could never imagine being a hot shoer. So,
I I wanted to touch on it because your son Cody just got his fellowship with
yes.
the WCF, the Worshipful Company of Farriers.
Yep.
A lot of my audience doesn't even know what that is or that it exists, and you have your fellowship as well.
I do.
And
Yes.
and you were one of the first, weren't you?
Well, okay,
In the U.S.
I was the second American. So the Worshipful Company has been around since 1356.
13. Oh, I thought it was, wow, I thought it was 1439.
Nope, 1356. Their modern history starts in 1674 after the fire in London. So that's whenever they have a good written record. And they have 3 levels, basically. A diploma of the Worshipful Company of Farriers, which you have to shoe horses in the United Kingdom. The associate of the Worshipful Company of Farriers would be a very, very skilled tradesman. You can be an approved training farrier. You can take apprentices. And so that is the level that most craftsmen would try to achieve. But it's a very high level. And then the FWCF is considered the highest level in the world. And so it's a lot to do with how much you know about horseshoeing. You got to do a lecture, you got to write a research paper, you got to do a lot of stuff above and beyond what most horseshoers would ever do. So Cody got his journeyman when he was 15, his diploma when he was 17.
He's the youngest, isn't he?
Well, interesting. So he was 15 years old and 9 months. And I had a student that came to school in '97, an Amish Mennonite gentleman. And when his son turned 13, Javin, he sent Javin to school. So Javin was a 13-year-old boy in my horseshoeing school. And he got his journeyman at 15 years and 8 months. So I have trained the 2 youngest journeymen ever, but Cody got his record beat by Javin by a month. But nobody knows about Javin because being Amish Mennonite, they wouldn't let us publish it. They wouldn't let us take pictures. It's just so it's he's known. Cody's known as the youngest journeyman because it got publicized. But anyway, he had his diploma at 17, and he passed his associate horse at 19. Or I'm sorry, his associateship he got it at 19. So he was at AWCF at 19 years old, but he wanted to do his fellowship at the highest level. And so he got it with honors. There's 6 guys that have done that in the last 60 years. But whenever he did his fellowship horse and he did his fellowship thesis and his fellowship lecture, it was just done at such a high level that
Wow.
Most dads want their kids to exceed them, and Cody does it time and time again. I'll do something that I thought was pretty cool, and then he'll do it better.
I heard a quote, and it said that your father is the only one that will truly be happy when you surpass them.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that's true because a rising tide lifts all boats, and I love to see I love to see my students do well. I love to see my graduates go out there and ding the bell, and get. I wasn't a journeyman until I was 23, and I was the 344th journeyman in 1991, and I was 23 years old. And I'm sorry, I got it. Let's see, in June of 1991, and I was 22. So I got it right before I turned 23. I got it like a week before. And at that time I was the youngest journeyman, but there's only 344 up to that point. And so then people started beating me left and right, and pretty soon there's an 18-year-old did it, and I think Ben Yeager did it when he was 18 in Vancouver. And now you get a smattering of 17s, 16s, and what have you. And I think it's awesome. I think because of the way people are able to learn with YouTube and with stuff we're doing and with clinics and with all these things, there's a 15-year-old that is way better than I was when I was 30, because that 15-year-old has access to stuff that I just didn't have access to.
And I know a lot of guys, especially the old school guys, really hate social media, and but it is, I think it's the future, and I
I
think
had to embrace it. I didn't want to, but I had to.
because and you've done I feel like you've done a great job of that because we have videos I mean your book is like, not to do a little plug for it, but your book is the best way to study anatomy that I found. The
Yeah,
simplest form.
but it's not social media.
No,
That's really old
but
school.
and it's not social media, but I found it through that.
Oh,
Like
okay.
I found you long before I found Paul.
Sure.
So maybe there was a seed there, you know. I was at least open to it because I'd seen your stuff.
Now, are you a reader?
Yeah, I read constantly.
Oh, okay. Okay. What do you like to read?
Mostly biographies.
Okay.
Mostly historical stuff. I have some stuff that I read that I do like, some sci-fi stuff and stuff like that.
So like Brandon Sanderson or
I actually am into Warhammer, if you know what that is.
Warhammer. I guess I'm not familiar with that.
So it's like if Star Wars and Star Trek had a baby, and it was way cooler.
So it is sci-fi space.
Yeah, so it's space. They actually, so the crazy thing about it is you can go. It's a very well written series, depending on what author you pick.
So there's several authors writing in that universe.
Yeah, there's thousands of books.
Oh wow. Okay.
Like you can. I've been reading those books. I think I have 200 of them. I grew up reading Louis L'Amour.
Okay. Nice.
And I feel like he gave me. And then I grew up. The other one that really made me like to read was this TV show Have Gun Will Travel with Richard Boone. And I know that sounds silly, but he would use Shakespeare and stuff. And I like the sound of words, and I like.
Are you a writer?
Not especially. I like research, and I have done some writing, but I'm not I wouldn't claim to be a writer. I can write.
Have you read any Connie Golden?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, he writes historical fiction. So
really?
Like he wrote an Emperor series about the Roman era.
Oh, that'd be
he wrote
interesting.
a series about Genghis Khan.
Really?
Really good stuff. Conn, C-O-N-N-E Golden, I-G-G-U-L-D-E-N.
I'm gonna have to put. So like recently, I'm reading W.E.B. Griffin.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I liked his stuff. History for me is like, I feel like, so a lot of people, I guess, like read self-help books and stuff like that to help themselves grow. For me, I find that in history.
Okay.
I find my inspiration by reading about great men.
Sure.
You know, and the American frontier, the Civil War.
So if you could go back in history and have lunch with one of these great men, who would you choose?
I mean, the first name that comes to mind is Stonewall Jackson.
Oh yeah. All right.
I don't know how much you've read about him, but his life. The other one that I would really like to talk to would be Lincoln or Grant.
Okay.
That or Mark Twain.
Yeah. I visited his house in Connecticut.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
Always. He was the first American author, comedian, international celebrity, really.
Yep. Yeah, and during his own time.
Yeah.
Which, a lot of times that didn't happen back then. But,
No, and he lived a life, and it's a lot like the country music from the 80s and 90s, Merle Haggard and Johnny Cash. They were writing about stuff that they knew.
Right.
It wasn't some guy writing a song or getting a song written for him and then singing it, And I don't know, what do you listen to music-wise? What, like?
There's two kinds of music. There's country and western.
Right.
And so that's pretty much it. On my Pandora, it'll be like the Chris Dew channel or,
Right.
Red Steagall. You know Red Steagall?
Yes, I do.
I interviewed him.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. I flew down to his place and interviewed him for my podcast.
That's amazing.
What a great gentleman. So I grew up with those kind of songs, and that's what I have on my Pandora.
I feel like those songs, they write about true things.
Right.
Like,
And things they knew, like you said.
yeah. And
are you musical? Do you play guitar? Or?
I can play a little bit. I like guitar. I can play a little bit. I can never get it to quite sound the way I want. Potentially I have perfect pitch.
Okay.
Um,
So that's why since you know what it should sound like, it really bothers
yeah,
you.
it really, I can't just sit there and like, and that's part of the pro. Like I struggled to play is because I can't get it to where I want, and then it doesn't. I can't, like, it frustrates me.
So being a perfectionist is.
Yeah, I'm pretty bad. I'm
So my wife is
obsessive.
a perfectionist, and I'm not. And
Oh,
that's why she
really?
married me, and I married her.
That I mean, that my wife and I are very similar. She can see big. She can see the big picture much more than I can.
Well, so mine was a joke. If you'll think about what I said, she's a perfectionist, and I'm not. That's why she married me, because she has to have perfection.
Oh. Homeschool.
Jokes, hey, just so you guys know, jokes are way funnier when you have to explain them.
It's a slow burn effect.
Yeah.
You know, it is funny though. You'll be working with a client or something because you have your joke of the day thing, and I do love the slow burn. Like when you say something to a client and they're sitting there going,
Yeah.
"Wait, what?" Like, but and I think, but with the music stuff, I really I love music. Books for me, I constantly want to better myself. I want to become a better person, a better version of myself.
Good.
And I want to be educated. I want to, and I do have I have a almost photographic memory.
Nice.
If not photographic, I can.
And did you finish college? I don't guess I didn't. Don't
I
remember.
got my associates.
What's it in?
Liberal arts, the only liberal thing I've ever done.
Besides your vote last Tuesday?
Yeah, exactly. My vote last Tuesday, I needed a woman president. Have you seen the Yukon Forge hammers?
I guess I haven't seen. Does he have a good?
He's got the
Oh, the Trump.
Yeah.
God bless him.
Yeah, I went in there and I was like, I want a 2-pounder, and he's like, I got one left. I was like, I want it.
So guys, listen, if you're listening to my podcast and you voted for Kamala Harris, you probably should unfriend me. I mean, Trump is my president, and anyway, I felt that should be said.
Well, it's interesting to me because I have several clients that are definitely on the other side of the argument from the way I view the world. I find that guys that are in ag,
Right.
guys that produce food, work for a living as a whole,
As a whole. Yeah.
usually fall on one side of the aisle rather than the other. But it's kind of fascinating to me that, I tell them, I'm like, you can talk about whatever you want to talk about while I'm here, but just so you know, whatever you bring up, make sure we can still be friends when I leave. Like, I'm not going to hold it against you.
Yep.
Like,
well, I'm not going to hold it against them, but if somebody comes in my news feed and really trashes my beliefs, then I
it's not
unfriend them.
respectful at that point.
Yeah, and I don't go on a liberal friends.
I don't either.
And do anything, And I have a few liberal friends that I know are quite liberal, and I just don't discuss it with them. It's just
well, and sometimes it's better to just say, well, we don't agree, and leave it at that. But I think I do think, and I think if people could get past this, right? If they could look at it this way, most of us just want to make a good living. I don't think most of us think we're going to be millionaires or anything like that, but most of us just want to make a good living. We want to have food on the table for our family, a reliable rig, be able to do the things that we like to do, and have the government the least amount possible in my pocket.
Right. And in my business.
Tell
me how to do it.
Yep. Yeah, and I've noticed, like, again, in ag, the government is the most inefficient.
Oh yeah, no, it's not. It's not the way to get things done, for sure.
No, I mean, look at the U.S. mail. How many times does your package arrive on time?
Yeah, and that's just one small example.
Right.
Yep.
And but and what so if you had a piece of advice for anyone that's looking to go in to be a farrier, to do anything like that, what would it be?
Be coachable. If you show up at school and you already know how to do it, then don't come to school. And I'm not. I've had students that have had 30 years experience come to school, but if they were coachable and were willing to change where they stood, or change where they held it, or change where they hit it, or do the things that I'm trying to show you. Um, but if you're raising a kid and you don't teach them how to learn, if you don't teach them how to be coachable, you're going to raise a kid that's going to be very miserable and is going to have a hard time achieving anything. So, you know, when you go learn from somebody, if you're a young farrier, you're going to ride with somebody, you're not there to teach that person how to shoe horses. If he tells you he wants the clinches to be 5/8 of an inch long and pointy on the end, well, that's what you do. If he tells you he wants it to fit so you're not covering the heels, that's what you do. You just do what he did. And sometimes you learn what not to do, but you still learn something, right? But it's very, very hard to be an educator and show somebody how to do something and then find them trying to reinvent the wheel just because it didn't feel right in the beginning. So you've learned how to play guitar. You already know. It's hard in the beginning to learn how to play a chord without turning the guitar and without looking at your fingers.
Right.
Right? So you have to force yourself to do the hard things if you want to end up doing the guitar. Well, it's the same thing with pulling clips or shaping a shoe or building a heel or making a toe bend or any of that stuff. You have to force yourself to follow the technique and do it a certain way for a certain amount of time until you learn how to do that. Now, once you know how to do that, then you figure out what works for you. And if pulling a clip towards you works better than pulling a clip to the side, that's irrelevant if you come up with the same clip at the end. But if you refuse to be taught, then it doesn't matter what I do. So the students that we have that are very successful, we had one year where we had 7 guys get certified and 3 guys get their journeyman in the same year they came to school.
Wow.
But they were coachable. And when I told them to do something, they did it. If you have to spend 10 hours at the anvil to learn how to shape shoes, you got to spend 10 hours. And if you spend 5, you're not going to learn how to shape shoes.
Right.
So it's going to take that amount of time. It doesn't matter what I say. There's not a magic formula. There's not a key. There's no one thing I can say that's going to make you learn how to shape shoes.
Right.
But after 10 hours standing at the anvil and I come up, if I say to you, if you're at this part of the horn and you hit just beyond the center, you're going to bend the shoe in this way and get this radius. If I say that to you on day 1, it probably doesn't mean nothing. 10 hours later, if I say it, you're like, oh, now I see what he's talking about. But it wouldn't have mattered if I said it earlier. And even, you know, oftentimes there'll be a month in the class and say, oh, that's what you're talking about. And I haven't showed them anything different. It was that they had finally got to the point where they're ready.
Have you noticed that students, like, you say the exact same thing to them, like you give them a piece of advice, they don't get it, and then Cody comes along,
right,
says the exact same thing, and for whatever reason the light bulb comes on.
Yep. And sometimes it'll even be like Dusty will be visiting and he'll shape a shoe and they'll be like, oh man, you see how Dusty did that? He's on top of the horn, he did that. And I don't really care, you know,
right,
as long as they learn it. But it's only because they had the previous experience.
Right.
That they, and if they will spend the time behind the anvil, there's no replacement for that.
Right.
If you want to learn how to play guitar, you could have the greatest guitarist that ever lived teach you how to play guitar. And if you spent an hour with him, went home and didn't touch guitar, came back next week for another hour, it wouldn't matter what he showed you.
Right.
So horseshoeing, blacksmithing, all of it is the same way.
Right.
If you're not willing to put in the work, it really doesn't matter what the instructor is going to do for you.
I think that's what the draw too is it's so much feel.
Oh, yeah.
You can feel when you're in the right position and the hammer's where it's supposed to be and the tong hand's doing what it's supposed to be.
Yep.
And like, I don't know what, to be honest with you, I was struggling. I failed my first CF this spring. And that's kind of embarrassing. You know, you've been doing horses for eight years and you show up and you get your ass handed to you, you know. And the thing is that not one of those guys made me feel bad about it. They knew I felt bad anyway. If anything, they came over and go, let's sort this out.
Right. They turned it into a learning opportunity.
Yeah.
Yep.
But if you come in there with a cocky attitude, I saw something on one of the farrier forums. The guy's like, yeah, their journeymen are mean to me, blah blah blah, and you could just tell by his vibe that no one can teach him anything.
Right.
And I was like, maybe if you came to the anvil with the attitude, I'm willing to hear, I'm willing to learn, I want to hear what you have to say. So I'm coming from, you know, the crazy thing about this podcast that's kind of fascinating to me is I'm coming from the position of a student. You know, like that's where I'm at. That's my part of the journey right now. And you're educating, and so it's fascinating to see the overlap. Like
Sure.
the things that you say, like just be teachable, just you know, and really it's all about checking your ego at the door.
Oh yeah. Well, you know, you're telling me about your mentors that hated journeyman.
Yeah,
They're the guys that go to the certification really, really cocky, and then super offended when they don't get it.
right.
And then they're obviously the journeyman was a butthole, and that's why they didn't get their
Yeah.
certification.
Well, and that's so last night I showed I was sitting down at the bar drinking, and I pulled out my pictures of my CF run, and they kind of tore it apart. And you know, you'd like an attaboy, but attaboy doesn't make you better.
Yep.
Like I'm sorry, and I feel like my generation especially, we do not take criticism well. We have not been.
Yeah, there's too many trophies, right?
Yeah,
Everybody gets a trophy.
we haven't like my dad used to have a saying when I was little. You know, he'd say, "You're special, son. Special needs, but special nonetheless."
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and that you know, I was raised really old school. That was just you know, we worked. We didn't have TV, didn't have phones.
Got a spanking.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was probably the worst offender. And I told my dad, I think I was 24 or 25. I said, Dad, I don't think you beat me enough as a kid. And he goes, you know, I think you're right. And it's true. It's true. You know, I mean, if you can, and like now I look at where I'm at now and it's like, oh man, that all paid off.
Mm-hmm.
Like discipline. Discipline is you can't go anywhere without discipline.
And you'll pay it forward now that you have a kid, because you'll know how to parent. And so a kid that never gets spanked and gets a trophy every time, when that kid becomes a parent, they don't know how to parent. And so it actually gets worse generation after generation after generation.
Well, and I mean, it's a testament really to, I think you can tell a lot about a person from their children.
Oh yes.
And not that there aren't great people that raised their kids, did everything right, and the kid just took a left
Sure.
turn, and you know it goes back to free will. But you know, talking with Dusty Franklin last night and Cody, and then talking with you, and then and a little bit. I didn't really talk to your son, but you know, I watched videos and seen his accomplishments. That's a real testament
Well, thank you.
to your abilities and how well you were a parent.
The reward for being a good parent is that you don't have to raise your grandkids.
That's unfortunately probably one of the most accurate statements.
Yeah, yeah. You get to enjoy your grandkids instead of having to be their mom and dad. You know.
Well, I was talking about with someone last night, and statistically speaking, without a father, kids are far more likely. Single mother compared to single father. Single mothers are far more likely to have kids not graduate high school, not graduate from college, end up in prison.
Really?
Yeah, that's statistically with you know sample size. They did the whole little study on it, and we look at our society today and we wonder why we're so messed up, and it's because fathers are absent.
Yep.
And I think young men are looking for that. Like you come into your school, do you feel like you're doing more, like I'll call it life coaching, parenting?
So to be honest, I often tell my students, if you'll learn about Jesus Christ through the school, he'll be worth way more to you than anything I can show you about a horseshoe or a horse's foot. But we change our students, every one of them, even if they don't want to, they leave a different person when they got there. I would think it's for the better. You know, if they come in and they're lazy, they're not going to survive, so they learn how to work. If they come in, they don't know how to get out of bed in the morning, they don't survive, so they learn how to get out of bed in the morning. If they want to graduate, they learn how to spend an awful lot of time going toward a goal, so they learn how to achieve a goal. So my job really is to make a much better human and teach them horseshoeing on the side. Now, one of the secrets to having a successful school, so you other guys that have a horseshoeing school, don't listen to this part, but the real secret is to attract high quality people. Right. Because if you have a really good, solid person that you teach how to shoe horses, when you're done, you have a good, solid person that knows how to shoe horses. If you have an idiot come to school, when you're done, that idiot may be able to shoe horses, but that idiot is still an idiot. You know what I mean?
Right.
So one of the things that's happened to us is that we have drawn kind of the cream of the crop. And by getting such great students, it has allowed us to enjoy a good reputation.
And that, I mean, so you mentioned work ethic. You mentioned and work ethic's such an important thing, and it's missing in a lot of ways. What's your day look like? How do you start your day? What time does it start?
So I try to stay in bed till 4. A lot of times I'll be up at 3:45. When I wake up, I'm up from between 3:30 and 4. I'm up almost every morning. Um, I answer emails. I take care of office business. I fill orders from 4 till 5. I read my Bible from 5 to 5:30, and then I either start writing or start working on my video production until about 6:45. I try to get in a little workout, and so a half hour about what I get, and then I eat breakfast with my wife, and we start our day. So like my textbook is 700 pages. Well, I wrote that in 2009, 2010, 16 months.
Wow.
But the only way I could do that was by getting up every morning at 2 a.m. So when you have a goal, people say, I don't have time to write. Well, you do have time. You just have to prioritize something and make it happen. The Gregory men, my father, my grandfather, the people I knew before me, were early risers, were extremely hard workers, were very goal oriented, very driven. We have in our family we call it the full Gregory. We don't do anything halfway. If you're going to shoe horses, you're going to live, eat, breathe, and sleep horseshoe until you achieve your goals.
Right.
If you're going to, whatever, it doesn't matter, play guitar, if you're going to be an archer, if you're going to write a book, you do what you have to do it. And all the Gregory men have always gotten up very early, and we'll have in a half a day's work before the day starts.
And then so you go through the day. When do you call it? What?
So with the school, we get done when we get done. And when I was a young man, we were shoeing 200 plus horses on the side. So we'd get done with school, and then my wife and I would go shoe horses till 7, 8, 9, whatever it was. So my daughter and my son, they grew up watching their mom and dad work like rented mules. And so, they never had a babysitter. So if our kids couldn't go, we didn't go. And so their daycare might be playing with a tractor in a stall, with a toy tractor in a stall, or sleeping on the hay bales. But they were with us all the time. And so you can tell your kids about work ethic, but there is nothing like showing them work ethic.
Right.
So now I got these grandbabies, and they're growing up right beside me. Cody, he bought his farm. It's 2 miles away as a crow flies. My daughter and her husband have a farm that touches his, but they live on our farm. And my kids and their spouses are extraordinarily hard workers. So the grandbabies are seeing work ethic.
Well, I seen that. That was your little granddaughter.
Yep.
And I mean, and for everybody that can't see it, she's so respectful. And like, she's a pleasure to be around. Like, you watch her, you're like, sweetie, would you, go get a shirt for whoever, and she just goes, right, yes sir, whatever, goes, gets the shirt, comes out. And then we were getting ready to leave, and I don't know if she wanted to go see someone or whatever, and she's like, I have to stay and mind the booth. Like, and I was like, that's just so cool. That's just amazing.
Yep.
And that's the third generation.
Yes.
that you personally have helped.
Well, yeah, and it's very cool for my wife and I to see our grandbabies growing up the way our kids grew up. Cody and his wife don't have a television. My daughter and her husband don't watch television. They were growing up on a farm. None of the kids have access to cell phones or internet or any of that stuff. They are growing up like a farm kid did back 50 years ago.
And I think simplicity, it goes back to the shoeing thing, simplicity.
Yep, simple basics.
Yeah.
So another thing though is Cody's wife's folks are still married. My mom and dad are still married. My wife's folks are still married. Cameron, my son-in-law, his parents were married. They both have passed, but they were married till death. And so there is a legacy that you pass on to your children by staying with your spouse. And even if your kid's 18 when you get divorced, you're still causing a scar.
Yeah.
You're still breaking something. And so You know, if you can provide that stability for your child,
Right.
you're going to provide a much better world for that child to grow up in.
Do you think the word commitment isn't there anymore,
I don't know
or
about
as
anymore.
much?
I don't know. I can't speak on that, you know, but because I think there's been divorce
Yeah, I mean, it's yeah,
forever,
but it's
you know,
far more common,
possibly.
and I feel like in my mind the way and I say this stuff. This isn't a statement though. You know, the way you rearrange thoughts in your head is by speaking, right? That's psychologically, if you most people rearrange and organize their thoughts by talking it through.
Okay.
So in my mind, I think about it and I'm like, we live in a throwaway generation. You know, it used to be you bought a fridge, and the fridge lasted for. My grandparents' fridge, I'm pretty sure, was bought in the '50s, and we were still using it when they passed away in 2000, whatever it was.
Yes, but manufacturing has they want to have a fail.
Right.
They want to have a fail at a certain point to force you to buy another one,
Right.
which is stupid.
But do you think that has transferred over
Oh yeah.
into our relationships and community as a whole?
Well, and it's not just that. You know, social media is bad for this.
Yeah.
Um, you compare your life to other people. Well, when you see somebody on Facebook, you're not looking at their whole life. You're looking at a
Right.
snapshot of the best part of it, right?
We do that with our horseshoeing.
We do that with our horseshoe. We do that with every aspect of it.
Yeah.
And so I think social media has made it a little bit tougher. I think that the loss of Christianity in this world has made it a little bit tougher.
I do, regardless of where people fall on this issue, I think the argument that Judeo-Christian ethics were the backbone of the United States. That's what we were founded on.
Yep.
And it's hard to argue with their success.
Yeah. Well, in God we trust. I mean,
Right.
it was the very fabric of the foundation of this country.
Yeah.
And it's being chased out of it, you know. And it does say in the Bible that there will come a time where you'll look at the world and what was right is wrong, and what was wrong is right,
Right.
and you know it'll be a sign that the end times are near. So, you know, I'm not a prophet, and I don't claim to be, but I do what I believe is right,
Right.
and I try to feed into the people I can what I can, and we're just trying to make our place a better place as much as possible. Our influence, wherever we can influence, we try to improve.
So in our mission statement for the Dying Breed, it talks about exploring morals, beliefs, and ideologies and lifestyles that are disappearing. That's what the podcast is about. And your own moral code. And I don't think a lot of people understand, or maybe they do, or maybe it's not. I don't know. But who you are when no one's around, when no one's watching.
That's character.
That's character, and you have a moral, like you make decisions not because someone makes you do that. You live a certain way, not because there's someone sitting over your shoulder. And as a horseshoer, I think this is super imperative, because when you're sitting there at that horse and you're like, I didn't cover that heel.
Yep. If you pull it off and fix it,
Yeah.
that's your character. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that is the definition of character.
And I think throughout every aspect of life, and I think I was raised on the idea that you shook hands
Yep.
and Dad, I mean, I had my ass beat a couple of times because I told a guy I was going to be somewhere
And you didn't
and
do it,
I
huh?
wasn't there.
Yep.
And if you tell a guy, now my brother's way better at this than me, I'll admit it. He like shows up 30 minutes early. He's that guy. If you say 6, he's there at 5:30. If you say 7, he's there at 6:30.
Good.
Yeah.
Early's on time, on time's late.
Yeah.
Yep.
Me, on the other hand, I am the stereotypical horseshoer. If I'm 15 minutes either way, I'm doing freaking phenomenal. and I try to be better, but it definitely, and some of it is the nature of the work we do.
Right.
Yeah.
A horse that should take an hour can easily take an hour and a half. Yeah.
Yeah. And we constantly, and that's, and sometimes you get there and there's an abscess.
Yeah. There's a lot of potential.
But dude, I've had this has been super cool, and it's amazing to talk to some, like I said, from a student perspective and an educator perspective, and career-wise. I mean, if with closing, what do you want? What's the last? What message do you want to close with?
You know, I don't really have one that we haven't covered. So
We've covered just about everything.
yeah, I'd throw that back at you. What would you like for people to leave this podcast thinking?
I think what we stated: check your ego at the door, be teachable. I was at a little forging demo. They were helping me with some stuff that I've been struggling with. And I literally went from one station. I signed up at one station, signed up at the next station that was available, and signed up at the last station. And it was just worked out that that's the slots that were available. I worked with 3 different guys. And I walked up to each one of them, and they said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "Well, this is where I'm struggling." They said, "Okay, well, what do you know?" And I said, "Well, you tell me how you do it." Because I got 3 different, slightly different. They're all kind of, the basics are all there, but 3 slightly different viewpoints.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as you keep an open mind.
Well, you might figure out one that works better for you.
Right.
So,
but if you're closed-minded, well, the last guy did. That's not how I do it.
right.
You might miss something.
That's being non-coachable. That's what I'm talking about being coachable.
So,
well, Caleb.
Thank you, sir.
Hey,
this was amazing.
Yeah, well done, man.
I had fun. I
did too. We'll see if our technology stayed on the whole time. I just wanted to send out a very heartfelt thank you. My textbook, it's been out now since 2011. So we're going on 14 years, and it's being used by a lot of the best farrier schools in the country. It's available at almost every farrier supply, and I really, really appreciate you reading it, using it, and making your horses better. So thank you guys very, very much. And I don't know if I have a second edition in me, but we'll see. You can find one at heartlandhorseshoeing.com. And if you want the audiobook, Brian Mullins, a great podcaster, he recorded it for the audiobook, and you can find that also at heartlandhorseshoeing.com.